Yo, welcome back everybody to a brand new video here on the second channel. Today we're going to look at some more new decks from Japan in rotation. So in the last couple of videos, we've looked at Future Box, we looked at Ancient Box, we looked at a bunch of other archetypes that are winning more of the meta, but now we're going to look at some other cards. We are going to look at some Gouging Fire EX decks, but we're also going to look at some other decks, and these include stuff like Walking Wake, Incineroar EX, all these other decks we're going to look at here in today's video on Pokebook. I'm pretty excited to see what we got. I got Bulbapedia pulled up here so we can look at any scans and translations for any cards that we need to see. But there is going to be a Champions League this weekend over in Japan, and I'm pretty sure that they are going to reveal even more new cards because there's going to be another set in Japan that is going to be featured in our Temporal Forces set. I don't think Temporal Forces is just Cyber Judge and Wild Force. I'm pretty sure there's another set that's going to be a part of that. And I think those new cards are going to get revealed this weekend at the Champions League in Japan. So I'm pretty excited. I will leave a link down below to Pokebook, the site I use here to look at all of the deck lists, down in the description. And if you are new here to the second channel, make sure to subscribe down below and go on to leave a like on the video if you enjoyed today's video. But let's get into some post-rotation stuff. So we'll start off with the Gouging Fire decks. Now, Gouging Fire is a very strong and new EX card, and we're going to pull it up here on a Bulbapedia so you all know what Gouging Fire does. So yeah, Gouging Fire is, of course, a basic EX Pokemon. It is an ancient Pokemon, and it is a Fire type, so it's actually got some pretty good energy acceleration when you consider it works with Professor Sada's Vitality and Magma Basin. It does have two attacks. The first attack does Heat Blast, does 60 damage, no effect. But then you got Blaze Blitz, the main attack on Gouging Fire. For 3 energy, it does 260 damage, and this Pokemon can't use Blaze Blitz again until it leaves the active spot. Now, the nice thing about Blaze Blitz is that you can just use Switch. You know, Switch is a very good card. There's Switch card in the format. You can use that, move Gouging Fire back into the active spot, and then just keep doing it. And you're doing a nice solid chunk of damage. 260 damage is pretty good numbers. And again, the nice thing with Gouging Fire is it has some pretty good energy acceleration within the format, thanks to it being able to work with cards like Magma Basin and Sada's Vitality. So let's look at some early lists. So the first list here we got, this one is a bit more of a fiery toolbox deck. It does have some interesting inclusions, so it is focused solely on the Gouging Fire, but it does have some other attackers. It's got that Entei V in the deck. It's got that Moltres in the deck. Some other interesting inclusions. It's playing a Mew, Luminion. It makes sense to play those two cards. It's basically like a Fire Roaring Moon deck almost. We'll zoom in a little bit more here so you can see a bit more. Now, the one interesting thing is it's incorporating the Iron Leaves EX into the deck. Now, Iron Leaves EX is a really cool inclusion in Ancient decks because Sada gets 2 energy into play. Iron Leaves does have that ability where, of course, you can, when you bench it, you can move all basic energy onto it and then switch in the active spot. So you can use Iron Leaves and put grass energy onto it and attack out of nowhere. Really good against Charizard EX, which this deck could struggle against. That's one of the big issues with these big basic EXs that are releasing in this new set is they kind of lose to Charizard or they have a tough time against Zard. But with this deck, you can go Sada 2 grass energy into play and then use Iron Leaves, go into it, and then attack out of nowhere and knock out Charizard EX. The Pogo Moltres are kind of smart. There's a couple of those in the deck. It does, like Gouging Fire, do 10 more damage. It already does 260, so with 2 Moltres, you can do 280 damage with Gouging Fire, which of course does knock out big, V-Star Pokemon like Lugia and Arceus and Giratina, which are all pretty popular right now in Japan. The deck also plays Mew, Squawkabilly. You kind of have to play those. The one thing this deck kind of loses is Battle VIP. It no longer has that immediate turbo option of getting a bunch of basics down super early, so it does have to rely on the Nest Balls and the Ultra Balls to get them basics, because again, with no VIP, you're a little bit slower. But when you have Magma Basin and Sada, it's pretty easy to build up a Gouging Fire. You can Sada to the Gouging Fire, you can base into it, and then you can attach energy from hand or energy switch, build up a Gouging Fire in a single turn. You got that early game pressure with Entei V. Another Gouging Fire deck is playing the new Baby Koraidon, which does 30 damage for each of your ancient Pokemon in play. It can be a nice little beat stick attacker. You can also, of course, use it as a 1-prize option, which is really nice. You can kind of swing the prize trade a little bit by forcing a 1-prizer into the active. You are playing the Sada, so you can build it up. You can even use its second attack. I guess we can kind of pull up what the Koraidon does here. It does have that Shred attack that does 130, so you probably won't get a lot of value out of that first attack, mainly because you are playing a lot of non-ancient Pokemon, but you can get away with using the Shred attack. Again, just having that 1-prize attacker that can do decent damage isn't too shabby. Got another Gouging Fire. This one's a little bit more straightforward. It's just playing the Entei and the Gouging Fire. It's got a couple of Moltres in the deck, but it is playing a one copy of Klefki, which can be good against mirror match scenarios against these turbo mirror decks. Basically, if you put Klefki in the active, you're shutting off Squawkabilly, which is pretty big. So, if you're playing against Roaring Moon or, another like turbo-y deck, you're going to slow them down quite a bit. And that's kind of the idea behind the Klefki. So I kind of like the idea of Klefki. I think Klefki's honestly a super underrated card against these big turbo decks because shutting off stuff like Squawkabilly can be very deadly. And I do like that idea. It's still got those 3 Pogo Moltres in the deck so that the Entei V could do 10 more damage. And then, of course, it is playing 1 Team Devo to help a little bit against Charizard. It is playing at 1 Sada, a little bit more relying on cards like Mela. You can see the 2 Mela in the deck there. Whenever something gets knocked out, you can put a basic Fire Energy from your discard pile, attach to one of your Pokemon, and then draw cards until you have 6 in your hand as a way to build up the Gouging Fire. Another build here, once again, just playing Iron Valiant in the deck. That's smart. I mean, instead of Pogo Moltres on the heavy side, you can just use the Iron Valiant. Still has the Moltres, but you can use Iron Valiant to put even more damage on the board. It's also playing the Cape card, too, over anything like Prime Catcher. Which is actually an interesting inclusion. I guess you can put Cape on Gouging Fire and give it even more HP. You do have Ancient Booster Capsule, though, which also kind of helps, I guess. This build is playing Armor Rouge. I kind of like that. Armor Rouge doesn't seem like a bad idea to play with Gouging Fire. You can maybe lean more into a fiery toolbox deck. There are some other fire Pokemon you could play in the deck. I think Delphox V still exists. You got Radiant Heatran, which is still in the format. I do like the idea of Armor Rouge and Gouging Fire. Could be a decent combo, too. This one here has a couple more ancient Pokemon. We do see the Fluttermane in the deck here. The Fluttermane does allow you, of course, to block abilities when it's in the active. Only your opponent's active Pokemon's ability, though. It's also playing the Iron Leaves. Once again, using Iron Leaves with Sada. It's not a bad combo because you can already play the Grass Energy. You can discard them, and then you can Sada them into play, and then use Iron Leaves' ability to swing it into the active spot. And then just play the Delphox V in the deck, too. You can build that up with a couple of energy switches. And you also have the Canceling Clone in the deck and Prime Catcher. You can Prime Catcher Clone Delphox, which is actually pretty cool. That's a strong combo. We got another build. This one's a Lost Zone at Gouging Fire deck. Honestly, I don't hate the idea of a Lost Zone build because you can play the Radiant Charizard in the deck instead of like Greninja, and then you can also play the Gouging Fire. And Gouging Fire is not a bad attacker. It does 260 damage. It's honestly, you know what it reminds me a lot of? It reminds me a lot of Dragonite V. It's not the same, obviously, but it does do something like Dragonite V used to do, where it was just a nice big attacker. It's got the same HP as Dragonite. I kind of like that. Yeah, Gouging Fire reminds me a bit of like playing Dragonite, because it just does big damage, which is what Dragonite did. And it doesn't really have like a big downside, because Lost Zone already plays a million switch cards anyways, right? We got another build using Iron Valiant here, and Iron Leaves. A bit more of a tooly box build because it's got Radiant Star, it's got a couple Mews, got the Fluttermane in the deck. But yeah, the Iron Leaves and Iron Valiant combo is kind of cool in the deck. And then we finally got another build here playing just the Valiant and the Pogo Moltres. Just trying to do bigger damage with the Gouging Fire when you have access to the Valiant's ping damage and the Moltres. So those were the Gouging Fire decks. Definitely some interesting builds there for sure. Gouging Fire, I think, is honestly a pretty strong card. Is it better than Raging Bolt and Walking Wake is going to be the main question. We're going to have to find out. Currently, we do have Raging Bolt decks available on Pokebook as its own category, and we had Gouging Fire as its own category, but we're going to look at some Walking Wake decks here in the other selections. The other selection here is just decks that weren't featured as their own, decks on Pokebook, like Gouging Fire, just all Gouging Fire decks. These are just other decks. So let's take a look. Starting things off, we do have a brand new Torterra EX deck, and I know a lot of people are going to be excited for this. This one actually got top 16 in a tournament. And you can't see that here. This one got top 16 in a tournament, which is kind of cool. So yeah, this Torterra deck is pretty sweet. Now, if you don't know what Torterra EX does here, we can quickly pull it up. Torterra EX does, of course, have 340 HP, and keep in mind, it does synergize nicely with other Torterra tools, like the Grotto that lets you search out a grass Pokemon, and you can even play it with the one-prize Torterra. The main attack is going to be that Forest Marsh attack that does 30 damage for each of your grass Pokemon in play. Obviously, you fill up your board, you're doing, 180 damage in total, which is pretty good. And then, of course, you have Jungle Hammer, which does 150 damage, and then you can heal 50. To be fair, that's not bad either. Healing 50 damage is nice, considering you do have a monstrous 340 HP. Another nice thing about Torterra, it is a grass type, really good against Charizard, which is the BDIF right now in Japan. So yeah, this build here is a grass toolbox deck. You can see a ton of different grass types. One thing to note is it does play the Toadscruel. Both Toadscruels within the deck, I think, is really smart. So the idea of the Toadscruels is Toadscruel EX does block Roaring Moon from being able to use Frenzy Gouging against you, which is really nice. And then you can use the Toadscruel the single prize option to block Superior Retrieval and Pokestop, which is really good against Shenpao and Goldengo, which are also pretty popular decks right now over in Japan. So I do like the idea of the double Toedscruel. It's got the Lillian V-Star in the deck. You can use that V-Star power to set up all your grass Pokemon. It's got the Iron Leaves in the deck. Not sure what that is. That's a Shaman. Yeah, it's a Shaman. I forget what that Shaman does. I think it like sets up your bench or something. But yeah, one of the best parts about playing a Grass Box deck with Torterra EX is you have access to Grotle, which allows you to search out your basic and your Grass Evolution Pokemon pretty easily with Grotle's abilities. You have a built-in search engine with Grotle, which is one of the nice things about the Torterra EX deck. I like this build quite a bit. It's got Gardenia in the format still. That card still exists. You got the TM Evo to build your board up. I like that. And the Toedscruel package makes sense too, so you got a better matchup spread against some of the tougher matchups. Funny enough here, we got a Minior Spidops deck. No real new cards. I guess there is that Prime Catcher in the deck. Yeah, the idea of this deck, obviously, is you do have Spidops and Venomoth in the deck. It's a pretty annoying archetype. You got the Minior in the deck for the Iron Hands. Yeah, it's an interesting idea. I mean, we've seen this before in the past. The Spidops Venomoth deck has existed. There's an interesting Quaquaval deck here. Quaquaval EX is a card that hasn't really seen much competitive play, but it is an interesting attacker. It's got that hidden run attack. For 1 energy, you can, or 2 energy, you can switch it, do 230. Or no, the first attack is the hit and run attack. The second attack, I think, puts energy back in your hand. But I guess like a stage 2 Pokemon like this does have access to that Neo Upper Energy, which does provide the 2 rainbows. So you can provide Quaval's attack for a single energy. You can use the hit and run attack to go into Mimikyu and Klefki. It's got Radiant Zard and Pidgeot on the deck. I kind of like this build of Quaquaval. I'm definitely trying to work on making a Quaquaval video too, because it's been a while. We got another anti-meta deck here. This one is a Vulpix Noivern deck. Cute idea. Did get top 8 in a tournament, actually, from the looks of it. We got the Vulpix V-Star, which is not a bad attacker. Blocking off Pokemon with abilities is pretty darn good. And then you got the Noivern, which can either, lock out stadiums and also be immune to basic Pokemon. So it's a bit of an annoying counterbox deck. It's got 4 Ditto and 4 Diancie. The Diancie does prevent your Pokemon from getting bossed up, which is kind of cool. It's an interesting idea for sure. We got a Fortress EX Toolbox deck. You can see why it's in the other category. But the Fortress deck is kind of sick. Fortress EX does have that ability. You blow it up, right? And then you can get a bunch of energy into play, which is really, really cool. You kind of just use attackers like the Woshan. It's also playing the new Brambleghast. Now, the new Brambleghast, I think, every time your opponent takes a prize, it gets plus 50 HP. I'm pretty sure that's what it does. We can, I guess, see if we can quickly find it here on Bulbapedia. There it is. Yeah, we can look at Brambleghast. So yeah, every time your opponent takes a prize, it gets 50 more HP. And it's already got 100 HP, so you can quickly add up the HP. You can use Fortress' ability to actually give it the 200 HP because you give your opponent 2 prizes, and then you put a bunch of Grass Energy on it, and then you do Powerful Needles. That does 80 damage. You flip a coin for each energy on it, doing 80 for each head. So that's a fun little 1-prize attacker. And you can use Reversal Energy with Brambleghast, which is also really good. You can activate Reversal Energy with Fortress, and you can play the Capes with it to give it even more HP. We have we got a Tinkaton Pulse Rotation deck using the new Dunsparce, where if it's in play, you can use the ability, you can shuffle it back into the deck and then draw 3 cards. So you do have to use a stage 1, so you have to get the Dunsparce down and then get a Dunsparce. But if you start chaining those, I mean, the deck does play a 4/4 copy of them. You can easily build up some big hands. The downside of Tinkaton is that it does lose the option to play Milotic. Milotic is rotating. It was Involving Skies, so we are losing Milotic for Tinkaton, which feels kind of bad. There's another Post-Station Quaquaval deck that's kind of funny. This Quaquaval deck does have 2 Mimikyu, no Klefki in the deck. It does play in that Neo Upper Energy, which isn't a bad card to have. We got a Swim Freely deck. You can kind of see they're all rogue decks. This one did get top 16. Swim Freely is an interesting idea. It can do a lot of damage. Sea King can hit pretty hard. You have that built-in ability with Finneon. Yeah, Swim Freely ain't too bad. Maybe it's worth trying out in the rotation. We got another Tinkaton deck here. Playing a Dunsparce. The Dunsparce with Tinkaton does seem to make sense. Maybe that's going to be the best way to play the Dunsparce in the rotation, is to pair it with Tinkaton, because it does allow you to build up a pretty big hand. Pidgeot's not a bad inclusion in the deck either. Yeah, I don't hate that. Don't hate that at all. We got our first look at a really interesting Lost Zone pile, and this is going to be an Ancient Pile deck. And this deck got top 16 using all 3 of the Johto Dog Paradox versions. That's pretty sick. So we got the Walking Wake, we got the Gouging Fire, and we got the Raging Bolt. And you can use Mirage Gate, of course, to power all of them up. So let's take a look here, I guess, at what some of them do. We looked at Gouging Fire. Hopefully you all know what Raging Bolt does. But Raging Bolt here... Oh, wait, what the heck? It didn't pop up? Hold up. Hold up. All right. Hopefully this one works. There we go. Okay. Raging Bolt does have that attack, which for a lightning and a fighting does 70 damage. You can discard any amount of basic energy from your Pokemon, doing 70 damage for each card discarded in this way. It's very similar to like Amazing Rare Rayquaza in a way, very similar to Bullcephalon GX from back in the day, and that was a really good deck. So Raging Bolt does actually synergize nicely within the Lost Zone decks. We'll look at early Raging Bolt decks very soon, but in this build here, you can use Mirage Gate to build it up, and then of course you got that Walking Wake, which we can look at here real quick. Walking Wake is a pretty interesting new card. It's got 220 HP. It is an ancient Pokemon, and then it's got that ability Azure Surge, where damage from this Pokemon's attacks isn't affected by any effects on your opponent's active Pokemon. So you can kind of shred through some effects like, Mimikyu, even something like Goudra that tries to tank or Alolan Vulpix V-Star. And then, of course, you have the main attack doing 120 damage. If your opponent's active Pokemon is affected by special condition, you do 120 more damage. So that's kind of cool. You can do a nice big chunk of damage. Now, you literally be affected by a special condition. I guess like the one downside of this build, doesn't seem to be a special condition card within the deck. It's just kind of trying to turbo the attackers here. I guess you can use Walking Wake to hit for weakness against other fire decks, which is, I guess, kind of why it's in there. Because, again, there's no Brute Bonnet in the deck to poison so that you can use Walking Wake's main effect. I don't see any way to affect your opponent by a special condition. I like the idea, though, because you can use Mirage Gate and Sada, and you can just build up your Raging Bulls and just attack with them. I feel like at that point, you don't need the Walking Wake. I guess you're using it more for the meme of having the 3 Paradox Johtos, but I still feel like you probably want to maybe play a different Agent Pokemon, because I don't think you're getting a lot of value out of Walking Wake. But I guess you can then use Radinger Ninja as an attacker, too. Okay, maybe I lied. Maybe because you have the Water Energy, you might as well play the Walking Wake then. All right, that's a cool idea. It's more of a Raging Bolt deck, but that's really, really unique. We got ourselves a Wish version of Zorobox, kind of. It's more of a Scizor deck, obviously, but you do have that Scizor in the deck. Scizor is a really strong Metal Pokemon. Metal's not bad right now. It does damage for each of your opponent's Pokemon to play with an ability. You have all these big attackers. You got Radiant Charizard. You got Reverse Energy Luxray, which is good against Pidgeot. You still have the Gallade and the Kirlia in the format. That's one thing to note. You got Low Kicks in the deck. I don't know what that does. I think it's when you evolve it, it does a lot of damage, which helps against Charizard. You got Maximum Belt in the deck. It's kind of like it's sort of basically just a post-rotation Zorobox deck, because you still have all the type coverage with Low Kicks, Scizor, Cleaver, Luxray. You got the Slowbro in the deck. You're just not using Zoroark anymore. So it's kind of like a rotation Zorobox deck, right, in a way. We do have our first look at Incineroar EX. Now, Incineroar EX, I am very excited for. This card, I think, is low-key extremely powerful and maybe underrated. So Incineroar EX here does have a really strong ability, Hustle Play, where this Pokemon's attacks cost 1 colorless less for each of your opponent's bench Pokemon. So if your opponent is benching Pokemon, and very similarly to how like Palkia V-Star plays, where you kind of punish your opponent for putting Pokemon in play. And then you got Blaze Blast, which does 240 damage. Keep in mind, if your opponent benches Pokemon, this attack can be used for even cheaper. It does 240 damage and burning your opponent's active Pokemon. That's like 260 damage almost. And that's a pretty strong card, man. This card is very, very good. You can also combine it with Relicanth, because there's a Torterra and a Litten that can do a bunch of damage for each damage counter on the Pokemon. So if you use Relicanth, the new Relicanth lets you use your previous evolution Pokemon's attacks when you evolve it. So if you use Rare Candy Litten onto Incineroar, you can copy Litten's attack that does 10 damage for each damage counter on it, and that means Incineroar can use the attack, and Incineroar has 320 HP, so you are doing a buttload of damage for your opponent attacking it. Incineroar seems like a very strong card, because you can punish your opponent for putting Pokemon in play, you can do big damage, and then if your opponent hits you hard and doesn't one-shot you, you can use Relicanth alongside the Litten to knock something out, which is really crazy. So Incineroar is looking very promising as a new deck. I'm surprised we're not really seeing it more. We got a post-rotation Guardy Bayonet deck here. It's more of a Bayonet EX deck. Bayonet EX does have that Wally supporter. There is a supporter card here that basically acts as Wally. You can evolve your Shuppet into Bayonet the turn you bench the Shuppet with that supporter card. I guess we can pull it up here if I can find it real quick. I forget what the supporter card is called. I think it's in Cyber Judge. I'm pretty sure. Where is it at? Where is it at? Is it Salvatore? Yeah, Salvatore. Search deck for a card that evolves from one of your Pokemon that has no abilities, and then put it onto that Pokemon to evolve it, then shuffle your deck. So yeah, you can literally play down You can play down Shuppet and then use Salvatore and immediately go into Bayonet EX and item lock your opponent. That does seem very deadly. We got the Gardevoir in the deck. Gardevoir with Bayonet's not bad because you can combine that with something like Professor Turo to have a heal loop. You got the Dunsparce in the deck as your pseudo Dronjin alongside the Curlias. Interesting archetype. Post rotation Bayonet does look pretty scary, I'm not going to lie, just because of Salvatore. We got another little anti-meta toolbox deck here. Playing 2 Scyther, no Scizor or Cleaver in the deck is a little strange. I guess you use Scyther for the Fruit Tree pivot. It's got the Iron Leaves and the Vulpix in the deck. It's got Woshin in the deck with 4 copies of Gardenia, which you can use Gardenia to build up Vulpix. We got that Kingja Basculean meme deck. I did a video on this deck already. It's a lot of fun to play. We got our look at a Wug Trio Post-Rotation deck here. It's using Snorlax and Mimikyu. Post-Rotation Wug Trio's fine. You know, you got the reversals, you got the Prime Catcher in the deck. You can try to stall stuff out and trap them. You got that Snorlax in the deck too, which we all love. We got an Aegislash deck here playing the Aegislash that is immune to V Pokemon and EXs, and then you got the Aegislash EX. Just did a video on Aegislash EX. We got another Fortress Brambleghast deck. Again, Brambleghast Fortress makes sense because you can use Fortress to make Brambleghast's ability even stronger. You can also then activate Reversal Energy. You can put a bunch of energy on the Brambleghast to do a ton of damage. It is a coin flip deck, but coin flip decks are always fun to play. We got another Incineroar deck here. This one does have the Bibarel engine. That seems kind of the best way to go about it. I don't know if you should play Incineroar EX with like Pidgeot. Like basically just play it like a Charizard EX deck. Like you play the Pidgeot and the Rotom. Instead of Charizard, you play Incineroar. You can get away with playing the Relicanth. That might be the best way to play Incineroar, to be honest, is like a Pidgeot Charizard engine. Just swap, Charizard out with Incineroar. Seems like it could be good. But yeah, Incineroar definitely looking pretty scary. We got a Torterra deck. Now, this one's not using Torterra EX. It is a single prize attacking deck here. It does have the new Rabsca on the deck, which the new Rabsca has literally the same thing as Manaphy and Jirachi in one. So it's a Manaphy Jirachi as a stage 1 Pokemon, which is really cool. So then you don't have to play Manaphy and Jirachi. Yeah, Torterra is not a bad deck. I mean, it does have access to Neo Up Energy, which is a nice energy to play in the deck. You could even play something like Maximum Belt, or you could even play like the Cape card, or you could, I mean, there's a lot of ace specs you can play in the deck. Dang, I was like, too much information getting processed here. You can play a lot of ace specs with Torterra. It's got the Luxray in the deck, the Gengar, you can put them into play for free. Pretty cool stuff. Post-Station Torterra is looking kind of sweet. We have our first look at another Palkia deck. This one is a Palkia V-Star Frostlass deck. Frostlass does provide a little bit of type coverage against Charizard EX, which is what a lot of the time Palkia struggles with. We got our first look at a Feraligatr deck. Now, Feraligatr is a really cool new card. We're going to pull it up here on Bulbapedia. Let's see if we can find the Feraligatr. I think it was in here. There it is. Yeah, Feraligatr. So this Feraligatr is looking pretty spicy. So yeah, it's got a pretty cool ability, Torrent Heart. Once you're in turn, you can put 5 damage counters on this Pokemon. If you do, during this turn, this Pokemon's attacks will do 120 more damage to your opponent's active Pokemon. And you're already doing Giant Wave for 160 damage. So you can do effectively 280 damage for 2 energy with the ability. You have 180 HP, so putting 5 damage counters on your Feraligatr doesn't really matter that much. It's not like it's going to survive the hit anyways. Like, in this day and age, it doesn't matter. But that's really cool. You can use the Palkia V-Star Star Portal to power up your Feraligatr. This is going to be a really fun one-prize deck to play. Feraligatr is looking pretty good, and it does combine nicely with Palkia. The only downside about playing Palkia, obviously, we no longer have Melanie or Raihan in the format to accelerate energy to it, which is a little sketchy. We have another Palkia deck, Dondozo Palkia. Hey, man, the meme works, it works. There you go. Dondozo's looking pretty funny. We have a Superior deck here. This is an interesting deck. I guess it's like an anti-meta deck. It's got the Mawile in the deck. It's got the Radiant Art. It's got Shiyu EX in the deck. It's got Fluttermane. It's got 3/3 Superior. It did get top 16 in a tournament. This is a very interesting lock anti-meta deck. Superior obviously isn't a bad attacker. It does have that V-Star power. You can hit and run. You can hit and run to the Fluttermane. I guess that's kind of the idea. Interesting. Yeah, it's a cool Superior deck. Just using Superior by itself. You got Muse and Attacker, I guess. That's an interesting deck. We got another Feraligatr deck. This one's not playing the Palkia V-Star in the deck. It's actually playing some Slowbros. It's got the Slowbro where you can move damage counters to it, and then you have the Pogo Slowbro, which is very annoying to play against because if you go down to 1 prize, you can obviously use the Slowbro to win the game. And then you have the double Bibarel package. The Bibarel here does block Mill, and obviously the Great Tusk Mill deck is a pretty good deck right now in the rotation format. So that's a cool idea to play Feraligatr with. Feraligatr can use Reversal Energy, which is obviously a big deal too, instead of playing with Palkia. Another Tinkaton, the Dunsparce deck here, obviously. Playing Bibarel to help against Iono. We have a really interesting control deck here. It's a control Gothitelle deck. I forget what the new Gothitelle does. I don't even know if that's a new card, actually. That Gothitelle might already exist in our format. I'm not too sure. We got our first look at a Grafii deck, so we can kind of pull up what that EX does. I think it's going to be in, okay, it's going to be in Cyber Judge here. Or Farigiraf, that's what it's called. Grafii, I called it I got the names mixed up, lol. Yeah, we got the Farigiraf here. Now, this thing is pretty cool. It's got that ability, Armor Tail. You can prevent all damage done to it by opponent's basic Pokemon EX. Now, obviously, you're not immune to stuff like Charizard, which is kind of annoying, but you are still immune to all the big basic EXs like Raging Bolt, Gouging Fire. Obviously, Roaring Moon does Frenzy Gouging you, but if you put a Miss Energy on it, you can knock it KO'd. And you got Dirty Beam, which can do 160 damage and then 30 damage to one of your opponent's match Pokemon. So the ability is really annoying to play against, and I actually really like Farigiraf. You can actually build it up with Xatu. That's kind of what this deck plays. It does play a couple Mist Energy, which you do need to play so you can beat Roaring Moon. Yeah, Xatu Farigiraf doesn't seem like a bad deck, actually. I kind of like it. It's got a couple TMs in the deck, Crisis Punch, TM Devolutions in the deck. TM Devolution will probably be how you try to beat the Charizard matchup, because, again, Charizard, unfortunately, can attack your Farigiraf. Then we got our first look at a Walking Wake deck. So we did look at that Walking Wake in the like ancient box deck, but this is a bit different. This is a Walking Wake deck by itself. So Walking Wake seems to be pretty good with Brute Bonnet, because you can of course poison, and then you can use Walking Wake's attack to do 240 damage. You can build it up very easily with Soda and Double Turbo. You don't even have to put 3 basic energy on it, which you could to do more damage, but you already do enough damage with the poison from Brute Bonnet. You can just go Soda, and then you can attach a DT from your hand and build up Walking Wake. You can also pair Walking Wake with Cloth, which is pretty sick. The sad thing about playing Cloth, though, is Electrode is not the greatest partner anymore, because Spicy Seasoned Curry does rotate. It's an E-Block card. I don't know what to tell you. They printed it as an E-Block card, is what it is. So Electrode no longer is a great option. So this deck might struggle into Charizard, but it is a cool archetype. You can even use the Flutter Mane in the deck with the DT and the Soda to build it up in a single turn, because Flutter Mane doesn't require any specific energy type. So yeah, Walking Wake Cloth could be the new way to play Cloth going forward. We got another really interesting Scizor Low Kicks deck, kind of just, again, anti-meta deck. We got a Noivern deck with Bronzong. So I do want to pull a Bronzong. So Bronzong, once again, pretty good with Salvatore. Actually, so is Noivern EX. Yo, hold up. That might be cooking. All right, let me find that Bronzong real quick. Bronzong, where you at? Bronzong. Here it is. Bronzong is really interesting. So Bronzong does have that attack Evolution Jammer for 1 psychic energy. During your opponent's next turn, the Pokemon cannot be played from your opponent's hand to evolve their Pokemon. So you block your opponent from evolving your Pokemon, and that's going to be really good against evolving decks like Goldengo, Shenpao, and Charizard. And you can use Salvatore to put the Bronzong in play on the first turn. So instead of like turn 1 item locking with Bayonet, you can turn 1 Evolution block your opponent. And if that's not enough for you, you can turn 1, you could technically put Noivern in play on the first turn of the game too if you really wanted to. Surprised the deck doesn't play Double Turbo, because you can go Double Turbo Noivern and then get a Noivern off on the first turn of the game. It's got some annoying cards like Crushing Hammer. Really cool stuff. Yeah, interesting. Bronzong's another really interesting card. We got another Feraligatr deck here. Playing Relicanth. I'm not sure what... Now I gotta know what the Crocodile does, bro. I'm curious. What's the Relicanth for? It's got the hit and run attack. Huh? Okay, I don't know if that really does anything. What about Totodile? What does Totodile do? Oh, it's got... so you can kind of play like a lock deck. You can use Big Bite to lock your opponent with Relicanth. That's interesting. You can put a Double Turbo on the Feraligatr, use Relicanth. This one got top 8, bro. It's actually not bad. You can put the Double Turbo on the Feraligatr and then copy Totodile and then block your opponent from being able to retreat. That's cool, actually. We got our... It's another Future Box deck. I don't know if we looked at this list specifically, but it is using the Iron Thorns. That does 70 damage, and then you reveal like the top 5 cards of your deck doing 70 damage for each future card revealed. Discard the future cards, but keep the other cards. Kind of already looked at that. We got another kind of Zoro Box deck. Kind of. We got the Scizor, the Cleaver. It's got the Luxray, it's got the Pogo Slowbro, the Charizard. This is like already probably like an okay deck right now, but it's basically just the new version of Zorobox. We got another Minior... Well, I keep calling it Minior. It's Spidops Venomoth, not Minior, Spidops. Another Incineroar deck here. Once again, I'm surprised to not see any Incineroar decks playing the... not surprised they're not playing the Pidgeot engine, because I feel like Incineroar with Pidgeot does seem to be like a decent idea. But I do like the build still. Bibarel, I guess, works too. I guess you can kind of lean more into like one prizers and then have like that really big, bulky deck. Big, bulky attacker. Yo, we got another Farigiraf deck. Farigiraf with Alolan Vulpix V-Star. So really trying to double down on being annoying. I guess you can use Vulpix against Charizard, whereas you can't use Farigiraf against Charizard. You can use Vulpix against Charizard. So Vulpix will be good against the evolution decks, like Goldengo and stuff, and then you can use the Farigiraf, which is pretty good against the basic EX decks. I kind of like that. That's a cool combo for sure. Then we got another Feraligatr deck. Feraligatr with that Gengar. Gengar does have that switch ability. I think. Yeah, it's got that switchability. I'm surprised the Gengar Feraligatr decks. Yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting idea. It's cool, though. I rate it. Feraligatr, there's a lot of Feraligatr decks we've looked at. That's kind of cool. We got a Walking Wake deck. This one is all in on the Walking Wake. It is playing the Turbo Walking Wake with the Brute Bonnet. There is no Cloth in the deck, which is interesting to see. It just tries to lean more into the Walking Wake. Of course, you can make Walking Wake its own attacker with the Sod and the Double Turbo. You can play Ancient Booster Capsule, too. Keep in mind, you can give your Walking Wake a ton of HP with Ancient Booster Capsule. Another Tingaton, the Dunsparce, playing the Nimona Backpack Engine. Swim Freely again, and look at that, another Tinkaton EX deck. Insane stuff. We got another Incineroar deck here. This one is an Incineroar deck, once again, with Bibarel. It is playing NTV in the deck, but yeah, interesting. It's got Mela. Mela's not bad, actually, with Incineroar either. Yeah, I like it. Incineroar does seem very strong, like I said. It seems like it's going to be a really good deck. We got another Scizor Toolbox deck here, playing Liepard in the deck over Kirlia. Interesting. We got another Feraligatr deck. This time it is Feraligatr with Palkia, so trying to lead more into having Palkia as an attacker too, instead of just solely focusing on Feraligatr in your deck and other interesting tech cards, so I don't hate it. Palkia is still a really strong card, like I said. We got a Rotom V-Star deck. Rotom V-Star, I feel like kind of stays the same as rotation. I mean, it does technically lose some tools, but a lot of the tools are fine. I mean, you still have the good tools like the TMs. You can play the new Cape card if you want, I guess, which this deck does play. You got EXP Share still, Crisis Punch, Cramorant still an option. You actually do gain the new supporter card here, so I guess we can pull that up. Why not? You got that new supporter card, which does also seem pretty good. Explorer's Guidance with Rotom is a great way to discard tools. You go the top 6 cards of your deck, put 2 of them in your hand, discard the other cards. I mean, ideally, you can mill 4 tools with the effect of this card, which is nice. So that's actually a decent upgrade to Rotom V-Star. I did a video on Rotom V-Star on the main channel today. Make sure y'all go watch it if you haven't already. Take a ton once again. We got a very cool Metang deck. So this is Metang with Zamazenta. Now, Metang Dialga is looking pretty good, and I'm sure that'll... I mean, I think that's in the Dialga category on Pokebook, but let's pull up what Metang does here, because Metang I am super excited for. Once you're in turn, you may look at the top 4 cards of your deck, attach any number of basic metal energy you find there, and then attach them to your Pokemon any way you like. So if you stack a bunch of Metangs in play, and when you have 18 metal in the deck, which this list does play, you can put a ton of metal in play. And I guess it leans more into using Weirdeer as an attacker as opposed to Dialga V-Star, but it does have a Zamazenta. It's more of a one-prize attacking deck. It's also playing the Flutter Mane to slow your opponent down. We got another Brambleghast Fortress deck here. We got a Gargansel deck. I still can't pronounce that thing's name, which is crazy, but this isn't... I think this card will come out in the new set, but I can't really read the scan and translation. It's basically just a stage 2 like Goodra. It does like kind of what Goodra does. We got a Wailord deck here. Interesting. Wailord with Mela. Huh. Interesting. I guess you can put reverse energy on Wailord and attack with it. It's an interesting deck. Crazy stuff. Another Incineroar deck. This one not really playing a draw engine, just opting for a bunch of fire Pokemon. In fact, it's playing a lot of the Entei. You got the Entei, and you got the Gouging Fire. It's got Radiant Heat Rain in the deck as opposed to Radiant Zard, but it still plays, obviously, the Relicanth. So yeah, cool stuff, cool stuff. Another Feraligatr deck here. This one, a bit more simple, just plain Feraligatr with Pidgeot. You can still lean into Totodile, I guess. So I guess it still makes sense to play the Pidgeot V in the deck. And you can play the Crisis Punch, which is good. Just keep it all one-prize focused. We got another Walking Wake deck here to end off the other decks. Walking Wake with Palkia V-Star. That is another way to play it. So you can play Walking Wake by itself, which we saw. You can play Walking Wake with Cloth, or you can play with Palkia V-Star. That's another option. You can obviously Star Portal to your Walking Wake. If you're not going to Sada to it, you can Star Portal to the Walking Wake to power it up in a single turn. So I kind of like that. It's also a cool idea. Walking Wake definitely seems pretty good. I'm surprised it wasn't in its own category, like Raging Bolt and Gouging Fire were, but it is what it is. Those are all of the new decks here that we've looked at on Pokebook here in the other category that I had pulled up. Some cool stuff. We saw an early Torterra EX deck. Incineroar EX is looking pretty promising. Walking Wake is looking pretty good. We saw a lot of Feraligatr, too. I was surprised by the amount of Feraligatr we saw. But, of course, we also looked at the early Gouging Fire decks. And Gouging Fire is looking to be a pretty strong deck, too. I'm sure we'll get more post-rotation decks as time goes on. And I'm definitely going to be doing more of these videos looking at other early decks, too. Not just the ones we looked at. But I wanted to get these ones out of the way and kind of see what we got cooking up. Because I'm excited for Temporal Forces. There is a lot of playable cards. And with Rotation, too, it's going to be a lot of fun. But hope you enjoyed today's video here on the second channel. Once again, I'll leave a link down below to Pokebook if you want to go look at these decks yourselves. Thanks for watching. Have a great rest of your day. And, yeah, bye-bye.